Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well this evening or what time it is in the part of the world that you are in. So in this video, I wanted to talk about the issue of fair play points. And we saw it come into effect in this World Cup. It proved very decisive in Group H between two teams, Japan and Senegal, but in order to give the lowdown of what happened and give some thoughts on fair play points itself, the way that it came to be used in this tournament, sort of hopefully generating discussion to share your thoughts below whether or not you think it is a good tiebreaker to use if all else is identical in the head-to-head records of teams that are tied, So, but before I get into that, like I said, I just want to give like a brief rundown of how it happened, right? And then we'll discuss it. So in Group H, the teams were paired in this order, as you see it here. So Poland being the seeded team in H1, Senegal were H2, Colombia H3, Japan H4. So Group H of the 2018 World Cup being Poland, Senegal, Colombia, and Japan. How the results panned out were the following. If you remember the opening day for Group H, we had two big, well, I wouldn't say very big surprise, but two surprises, because the two teams on paper that were favorites, Colombia and Poland, take your pick for whichever order, they both lost their opening match. Senegal was victorious over Poland 2-1, and Japan was victorious over Colombia 2-1 as well. Then on match day 2 in Group H, we had Poland versus Colombia and Japan versus Senegal. Colombia gave Poland a 3-0 spanking in one of the best individual team performances of the World Cup, in my view, and a thrilling match between Japan and Senegal that ended in a 2-2 draw. So at this point, Poland were eliminated with a game to spare. Colombia came back into contention by getting a win after their opening loss to Japan, and the two group leaders, Japan and Senegal, finished all squared and on 4 points each. Then the final match day of Group H, we had, I believe, Senegal versus Colombia and Japan against Poland, right? And the way that this ended was 1-0 to Senegal with a goal through Yerry Mina, a header. Late on, I believe in the last 10 or so minutes of the match, and a 1-0 victory for Poland over Japan that saw Poland end on a high note with 3 points. But the last few moments in both games that were played at the same time, mind you, were really kind of nerve-wracking and shaky, because in the live standings, Poland had scored on Japan before Colombia had scored on Senegal. So what happened was when it was still 0-0 between Senegal and Colombia, and when Poland took the lead against Japan, Japan went down from first in the group all the way down to third, and Senegal and Colombia were in a position to advance, because remember, at this point, Poland was already eliminated. And then when Colombia took the lead against Senegal, Japan played a rather risky strategy of just containing the ball for the last few minutes of the game, especially into stoppage time, because in the live standings, as many fans in the stadium and the staff on the sidelines were aware of what was happening in real time, Japan were through because of the fact Colombia took the lead against Senegal, and this is where the less yellow cards came into effect. And I say it's a risky strategy because they pretty much depended on Colombia getting the full 3 points at that point in time against Senegal, because if Senegal had gone on to equalize, well, Japan would have been out of the World Cup. And they also played a risky strategy because, you could argue that Poland could have scored on them again, and at that point Japan would be out due to goal difference. So either way, Japan got a lot of criticism for playing cowardly, playing very conservatively, not trying to take too many risks, even though what they did was a risk. I would argue that had they pressed forward searching for an equalizer against Poland, they could have left themselves open to concede another goal. At that point, they would have been out. So I understand why Japan did what they did. I don't hold it against them. It's not like this was a team that played anti-football for 70-plus minutes. This happened in the last 10, maybe less minutes of the game. So from their perspective, in a tournament that comes around every 4 years, I understand. And really, it wasn't really reflective of Japan's overall performance in the group stages. They played some exciting football, right? But anyway, so that set the scene. And when the final whistles blew in both games, Colombia, who had turned things around after losing their opener to Japan, got the full 6 points available and actually topped the group. They lost their first game, but they topped the group. Japan finished in second, Senegal in third, and Poland finished bottom. So 6-4-4-3. Every team in this group lost a game, similar to Group F, with Mexico, Germany, Sweden, and South Korea. So you could really look at it this way. Group H was another group of death. And in my opinion, it really did live up to its potential as being one of the most exciting, unpredictable groups in modern World Cup history, really. So why did Japan finish ahead of Senegal? So 4 points each for the two teams. Japan had 4 goals scored, 3 goals conceded. Senegal, with 4 points scored, 3 goals conceded. Their head-to-head, which would be the next type, same goal difference, by the way, +1. The next tiebreaker would have been head-to-head, in which both teams finished 2-2 against each other, and then that's when the yellow cards came into play. Japan finished with 4 yellows to Senegal's 6, and thus Senegal finished as the first team ever in World Cup history to be eliminated through the fair play points rule. Now, that I gave the sort of the explanation of how it happened and the whole build-up to it, let's have a discussion. Is it a fair tiebreaker? If you're gonna ask for my opinion, well, I might as well while I'm making this video. I would say I think it is. I think it is fair, and here's why. So, all else being equal, if two or more teams' record is exactly identical, some would argue that you should use a penalty shootout. Don't leave it up to something that is random, like a coin toss or a drawing of lots, which is actually one of the tiebreakers, according to the rules of FIFA, once the other rules have been exhausted. And indeed, in the past, drawing of lots has been used. It was used in the 1990 World Cup to separate the Netherlands and the Republic of Ireland for who would finish second and third in their group. And it happened in the 2015 African Cup of Nations when Mali and Guinea finished with an identical record, and they had to be separated through a random draw. And in several decades past, the tiebreaker used in FIFA games, in qualifying, friendlies, etc., was a literal coin toss. I mean, literally a coin being flipped. That seems a little unfair. So, it's certainly fairer than using something random like picking a name out of a hat, which essentially is what drawing lots is, if you think about it. Because it is an overall a continued reflection of the team's performance on the pitch. If you accumulate cards, that's a reflection on your brand of play on the pitch. It just is. So then why not use a penalty shootout? Well, you could, but the issue with using a penalty shootout over fair play points is it's not something that can always be used consistently. And here's why. So let's say a group stage finishes and two teams are tied. All identical points, goal difference, number of goals scored, head-to-head, you name it. And both of the two teams, two of those four teams in the group that are tied, let's say they are the two teams who played each other on the final match day. You could certainly put them to a penalty shootout, and that would decide a winner. But what if two teams in a group are tied with an identical record on the final match day, and they're not at the same venue? What if it was Colombia and Japan that were tied, or Colombia and Poland that were tied, and they're playing thousands of miles away from each other in the venue? So then you have an issue of inconvenience. So what do you do then? Do you disrupt the two teams' travel plans and their schedule and fly them in to the same venue to play? You say, well, okay, well, why not? A plane ride nowadays is only a couple of hours with, advancements in transportation and whatnot. But that begs the question of, okay, when it's concluding a group stage of a tournament, where do you fill that in? Where do you find the time to squeeze that in to get the two teams to travel thousands of miles to meet up, have a penalty shootout that's going to last arguably just a few minutes? Does it not make it a whole hassle out of having the two teams be brought together? And does it not interfere with the two teams, not just their travel schedules, but does it not interfere with their preparation for the games ahead? You know what I'm saying? Because if you bring them in to travel and a team loses, they're eliminated, they go home. But they don't have enough time to plan ahead if they do survive the penalty shootout. And you see what I mean. You see how much of a mess that it creates. So then the question becomes, well, do you use a penalty shootout for two teams that are close to each other, two teams that are in the same venue, etc.? Well, and then use fair play points for teams that, otherwise it would disrupt their preparations. Well, you could, but I think it would be really weird and unfair and inconsistent, because why should two teams have their fate decided pretty much entirely through their own controlling their own destiny, whereas another one comes down to something as small of a margin as how many yellows, how many fouls you committed? So I just think that the penalty shootout reason is not it's ideal. I think that in a perfect world it would be, I guess, preferable to fair play points, but it's not a criteria. It's not a criteria that can be applied equally and fairly nor consistently as fair play points, because fair play points doesn't care about distance, right? Ultimately, like I said, I agree with fair play points, not just because of the convenience factor and how it can be regularly applied, but also because I think that it's still an accurate reflection of a team's performance on the field. And I think that using fair play points, if it has to be used, barring all else being equal, it provides more incentive for cleaner play, and it decentivizes foul play. And whether we like it or not, goals, substitutions, stats like possession, shots on target, and yes, card accumulation is just as much a measurement of a team's overall performance as anything else is. So, for those reasons, I think it's fair. I agree with it. I think that it's a shitty way to be eliminated because of the fact that it is such a small margin to be decided by, but at the end of the day, I think it's okay to use. What do you think? What are your thoughts on it? So hopefully I'll see you tomorrow, God willing. Until then, take care. Much love and peace.